Well, welcome back to week 3 of the 12 Days of Copilot. We are so happy to have you here as always. Um, Today is a great treat. So we're getting Scott on the road, Scott Furpier, our Chief AI Architect, and he has some really great tips for tuning up our agents. So if you're starting to dabble with agents, he's really got some practical things that he's going to kick off with to help make them work just a little bit better. Before I send it over to Scott, I want to make sure that you'll understand. So we have a charity every week that we're spotlighting. This week is really special to Stone Ridge. We are raising money, so $5 for every person who attends this webinar today and all week. For the Mike Gast Memorial Scholarship. So Mike Gast is our former president of Stone Ridge Software. He was a very beloved part of our Stone Ridge family, and there's a scholarship out there for the school that his kids go to, Moorhead High School, that is helping kids from that school that are seeking a career in business technology, business or technology, I should say, and also somebody who is an athlete. Mike was a big part of the hockey family up in Moorhead. And anyway, we are just really, really honored that we can have this be our final spotlight of the event. Yeah, thanks for the applause. We're really excited to have this be part of it. So let's pack the stage this week and see how much money we can raise for this scholarship. All right. Moving on. So let's go ahead and get Scott on the stage, and he is going to unwrap today's Copilot tip about agents. Thank you. We'll see you on the other side.
Welcome to another 12 Days of Copilot. As you can tell, my background is a little bit different today, and the camera I'm on is a little bit older as well. I'm actually traveling today as we basically go through what we call our year-end crunch. But obviously, I wanted to share a little bit more about what we can do with Copilot and how you can optimize your Copilot experience. With that, let's go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to see the magic just for a second here as I have OBS up and I minimize it, and let's go ahead and start going through really Copilot Studio and what we tackle in order to optimize performance. Now, one of the concepts inside of Copilot Studio is the fact that you can take information and you can attach it very much directly with the particular agent that you're working with. So an example of that is taking a document like a policy manual or a team guide and then attaching that directly to the agent. Now, there are some substantial advantages by doing that because the way that the agent can then access that information is really directly attached to the agent. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a quick look here. One of the agents that I have is this agent. As I kind of drill down into here and we go into our agents, like one of them that I could look at here would be, for example, our HR policy guide. Now, in our HR policy guide, it's a very simple agent. The concept here is to have an agent that can answer questions about documentation, right? Around any type of HR policy questions, such as leave or absence information. And if I go down basically to my knowledge sources that are related to it, or click on my tab here as well, what you'll see is that I actually have two different types of knowledge articles attached basically to this particular agent. I have, for example, our team member handbook from 2025 for Stone Ridge Software, and I also then have basically a Gartner human resources link that provides more advanced information about human resources that our team can ask about really this particular agent. Now, what's interesting here is that when we ask questions then that are related to this, the agent is able to identify the usage scenario basically of this particular knowledge article. And what's interesting here is that when you attach a knowledge article by clicking on the add knowledge and then uploading that document in this upload section inside of here, what it does is it actually goes, if we take a quick look at our solution here, it actually goes to that agent. I think I put them in the common data services folder inside of here, and yep, there's a bunch of agents. But if I look at my agent components that are related to this, and I filter then on the type that's related to these particular types of agents, I can see that there's an agent file attachment that I can go ahead and click on apply against. And what we should see is that Stone Ridge Software team member document that is now related basically to that agent that's been uploaded to that agent to interact with. So this is a really important concept because if you have, for example, documentation that you want the agent to very rapidly answer questions around, by directly attaching it to the agent, it's going to be much more performative. Now, there's the other aspect of this that you got to kind of consider, which is, well, wait, Scott, like I've got this on a SharePoint site, and basically I just want to point the agent to it and then have it access it. Well, and that's entirely valid. But remember, what you're doing is you're adding additional plumbing or distance between the agent and also the file to be able to access that information. So you've got to just be kind of cognizant of what is your response times that you want with it. And in high response time scenarios, sometimes adding that policy information, for example, as a file directly on the agent makes way more sense than adding it as, for example, a SharePoint or OneDrive library as a part of it. So it's up to you on how to do it, but just note that there are advantages to it. Now, the other one I wanted to kind of tackle here is the fact that even though you add knowledge basically to a particular agent, to be able to make it uh, accurate and then also performative as well. And what I mean by performative is performance based, not like it's acting. But basically, what you want to do is you want to go, for example, into for our area like a topic, right? So some of the concepts here for agents, remember, what an agent does typically when you put a prompt inside of the prompt box inside of here is that it evaluates the knowledge, the tools, the other agents, the topics that could then answer that particular prompt. And how does it do that? Well, it infers the context of what you're asking in the prompt to then align that experience to really what you define as what is answered as part of that inquiry. So an example would be if we go to our topics here and I look at some of the different topics I have, and the one I want to kind of open up here is going to be this leave policy details topic that I created. In this topic, I define, for example, at the very top here, if we take a quick look at it, which will pop up here, that this agent basically enters this topic whenever I'm trying to ask about employee leave policies, such as family leave, jury duty, or medical, right? And so this is a really important concept when it comes to the performance-based aspects of your particular agent. If you have topics that do not have a really good description regarding them, or knowledge sources, or tools, or even child agents that are related to this particular agent, what's going to happen is you're going to get really inconsistent or very bad results as you go through that process. So making sure that you define really what that topic or what that tool or what that knowledge source tackles is really kind of important. Now, the other thing to consider here is the fact that sometimes when you're uploading or even using a SharePoint site for the knowledge sources that you want, well, you don't want the agent just willy-nilly going and basically looking at all knowledge sources to generate an answer off of it. And this is a very important concept because when it comes to what we have experienced in our industry, when an agent is created and there are these concepts of hallucinations around it, really it's not hallucinations, it's that the context of the prompt is so vague that the search for the knowledge is not accurate. So it pulls information from a different source to then provide that answer. And you don't want that to happen, right? So what do you do to control that then to increase the performance and also make it so that the answers are more accurate? Well, when you build a topic, you can contain basically those generalized topics. So an example would be if I had 12 different documents that I attach to an agent, and each of those 12 documents are in a different domain, I may want to consider adding 12 topics as well for those knowledge sources. And the reason I would do that was I want the agent to really understand what path it should go down or what topic it should go down to then look at the right information. Because here's the really cool concept here. If I kind of scroll down just a little bit further inside of here and I go over to my left on my one that I've set up as an example, I can create an answer based upon that knowledge source information. And what I can do here, if I click on the edit as an example, is that I can actually go through and then define inside of here what knowledge source I want the agent to use then to answer that question. And once again, this is a really important concept because if you've got tons of different documents, I've got, for example, some law firms I've worked with where they'll just point the agent to their whole repository of policies and legal briefs and all that information. They're getting frustrated because they're like, well, wait a second, this isn't answering my question. Well, it's not answering your question because you're overwhelming the agent with information to be able to answer that question potentially. So in this example, for leave information, I want to go down this path. And then, for example, if I'm asking about AI or enablement around that, which is not answered in our US team member handbook, I want it to then maybe go to the Gartner site to search for that information. So this is an example then of how you actually then create better performance than related to, as you can see here, then this information inside of your knowledge sources, which is a really cool trick. Now, one of the other areas I want to show here, I'm going to go into my sales and finance environment with it because, like, if we start thinking about other scenarios with this, having an agent do the selection for the tools can be beneficial in some situations, but you have to consider the performance impact of it. So, just as an example here, if I go to my agents that are inside of my other environment that we're looking at, and I go into, for example, my MCP agent that I have because I built out an F&O MCP agent. Some of the things that you can do to help refine the patterning that happens with the agent is that when you create the agent, if you scroll down, for example, into the instructions section of that agent, it really defines what the agent should do as a whole when it goes through and does its processing. So think about it like this. Imagine that basically the very first thing that happens in the background for the plumbing here is that there is the instructions, there is all the knowledge topics, there's all the topics, there's all the tools, there's all the agents that are built in a text prompt that state, for example, here are your instructions, agent. Here are your tools that you have available. Here is the knowledge, and here's what the tools do and the description related to them. So there's this big prompt that's generated that's then sent to the large language model. And what do large language models do? They generate content off of it. So it takes that instruction information with that prompt and then basically determines what to do next with it. So the instructions here, as an example, as you can see here, that I have basically an objective that I want the agent to constantly tackle in the instructions portion of it. And what these do is it defines then, I want you to tackle this by using your MCP tools. So what does that mean? Well, if I go into my tools as an example inside of here, when I ask a question about this, what it's going to do is it's going to use this MCP connector that we've set up as a tool that's related to it. And what it will also do in the instructions, if we go back to it, is if we look at it, it tells you how you typically go through and do that flow, such as you look for a menu item, you open the form, you have a new button, right? And you have all these different controls that are available for it. So when I come in here, for example, and say, show me the on-hand inventory for released product A0001, well, the agent understands that I'm asking about released products, on-hand inventory, and more than likely now I'm inside of a business system. So what it does is it takes those instructions and it says, well, what MCP tool do I have available that can do that? And you can see here in the background, which is really, really cool. This is one of my favorite MCP implementations that I've seen so far, where basically it's navigating the application to get to the information that it's needed. What you can see here is that it'll actually go through all of these different steps to then get to the result that will then give us, for example, our on-hand inventory. I don't have time to show every single step inside of here, but it's a really important concept. Now, one of the final things I want to just kind of mention here is that when we deal with these tools, sometimes having a tool do its general type concept inside of here, where we just say, go use the tool to go figure it out. Like, can you imagine like a new employee where you don't have any training off of Dynamics and you say, go figure it out and what's going to happen with it? Sometimes they may be successful, sometimes they might not be. So, what can we do with that? Well, we can go through and also make sure that our tools are optimized in this process. So just as an example, if we go back into our home inside of our agents as an example, and if I go ahead and let's go back into basically our other environments, so we'll go into Copilot Studio, We'll open up our environment just really quickly here. And then inside of our environment, I'm back in my Scott for Peer environment. One of the examples I wanted to kind of highlight here is that when you build an agent that then does some of that data inquiry or gathering, so if I go, for example, to my commodity support agent inside of here, and inside of my commodity support agent, I've got some topics that I've set up that once again restrict where I'm going. So if I click on my topics as an example, and inside of my topics, I go through and I find the one that does the work inside of here. So if I expand this out, pardon me, my screen size, as you can see, is just really not good. So what we'll do is we'll do our purchase contract quote create. So it should be that right there. Well, inside of this particular agent now, what happens is that there's a prompt that gets generated, but there's also a Power Automate that is actually processed inside of here. And the one thing you need to understand is that even though this is a tool potentially that is set up inside of your environment, the different steps that it goes through affect that performance impact. And more specifically, if I go, for example, into my designer as an example inside of here, if you think about like the send email action, those are usually pretty quick. But if you go into here, for example, and you want to update finance and operations, so if we did fin, for example, some of these different types of connectors that are inside of here are very, very heavy. And what I mean by heavy is that they're very slow for performance. So just note that the ones that work the best typically with these tools are going to be the Dataverse ones. So if you have a scenario where you wanted to retrieve data, if you can get your data into Dataverse, an example would be when we do queries for finance and operations, they take 10 seconds to come back. And if I do it inside of Dataverse, it takes half a second, if not less, to get that same information. So remember, how you then use these Power Automate flows and what connectors are inside of there substantially impacts that as well. All right, with that, that's about all I have for today that I can do. Let's go ahead and get back to just chatting here. I wanted to thank all of you for taking the time. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you tomorrow on the next 12 days of Copilot. Thank you.